Now I see places and faces and things you ain't never thought about.
Hi, you've come to the Disruptive Technologists podcast. This is Lauren Kisan, your host. We're here with Harry Greeley, the Executive Director of Cushman & Wakefield, a gigantic real estate firm that caters to all sorts of people, but especially to technology. Harry Greeley, the Senior Director at Cushman & Wakefield, who's very knowledgeable about the tech space, what it takes to move in, where you could go, and how hard is it to get into it. Tell us about that.
Good afternoon, Lauren, and thank you for coming over today. Cushman & Wakefield, and I appreciate it. We've been working in the tech space the last few years. It's really been wonderful. A lot more spaces have opened up. You now can get short-term space. A few years ago, short-term space that only had 8, 10, 12, 15 months left on the lease, was impossible to market, to lease and dispose of. But today, you get people who need, with startup companies, need space for all different durations. You know, when they come to, a startup company comes to me and says, I have 10 people today, and I think I'm going to have 30 people in 3 years. I say, let's focus on the 10 people right now. Get them housed for 6 or 8 months, and then see what changes next. Because big companies can afford to have excess surplus space, in my opinion. If they are very profitable, they're doing well, extra space never hurts. But it does hurt small companies that don't have a lot of money. They have excess space. So it's better to be lean than have excess space.
Current news, Civic Hall, one of the technology alliances that just formed in New York City, they've been in the space on 5th Avenue near 21st Street, and they were asked whether they could stay another year, and the owner said there's going to be a 40% increase. Do you think that's normal for a tech company, that they're going to be presented with an option like that they may have to move?
Well, there is no normal. What there is that when you work for a company whose fees are paid for by the landlord, not the tenant. So there's no reason not to hire a broker. Broker comes in and should say to you, what are you going to do if the company expands? And then what are you going to do if the company contracts? What you'd like to do if the company expands, you'd like to have an option in your lease that you can take more space in the building and renew your lease at a fixed amount of cost. So you know ahead of time what this is going to cost. On the other hand, if you don't need the space, is there some way you can give it back other than through subleasing? And you go back to the landlord, pay them a small fee, and they take the space back. So you have to look forward and you have to look backward. How well things are going, and then what happens if things don't go well. As for the amount of the increase, I don't know. You know, usually if a good thing to start out with is, what's the increase in comparison to what it costs to move and relocate? You know, usually just to move into a built space can be as much as $10 or $11 between the moving, painting, carpeting, all these different things. It's easy to spend. When people say, as this space can be extremely expensive to move into. These are things you have to address early on so you know what the costs are.
Do you think that tech companies in particular want to get a big space right away, or are they just thinking that this is what tech companies do?
It depends on both situations. Some people have extra money, additional monies that they've gotten from their investment, and they feel they should use it and get the space. My attitude is you should get the space in comparison to how many people you have that really need the space for. You should sit down with the tenant and say, you have so many people this year. What's going to happen? What's going to make your company grow? And then how do we translate that into more people? There's no point in having excess space. You have to build it. You have to carry it. You have to pay the electric on it. It's a very expensive proposition.
What about companies like Microsoft? They just purchased a huge full-floor building next to Grand Central Station. It's beautiful, but there's not a lot of people there now, but I'm guessing they're expecting to be more. Why do you think companies like Microsoft do something like that? It's got to be millions of dollars a year.
Well, because it's another form of marketing and advertising for a company like Microsoft. Also, when they go to a building, just by the fact that they're in the building, you're going to attract a higher quality tenant. You might even impact on their mortgage, what it costs them when they refinance the building, because they have a more secure, well-financed tenant. So if a tenant like Microsoft, a landlord would bend over back to bring that kind of tenant to it.
You're a startup, and should you be considering location at this point?
I think when you're a startup, how much of a startup are you? How much money do you really have? Maybe you want to be on Madison Avenue and 44th Street. That might be able to be worked out if maybe you go into the block, into a building, a side street building, rather than an avenue building. Avenue buildings are more money. Maybe you can go to a tenant who has a lot of space, is a corporation, and they're giving up the time they're giving up their lease. So you can sublease their space. Depends. All these different things are ways to cut the overhead, which we know for a startup is very important.
So basically, is it harder to lease or help companies that are tech companies lease space? Because they're some of them are just startup-y, everything's changing all the time.
The shorter the period of time, the harder to effectively lease for the tenant. And of course, the financials of the tenant. and who the tenant is. Are they three gentlemen that got together that were involved with PayPal, or they had some terrific success? And the landlord looks at these guys and says, these guys are going to be great for my building. You really have to sit down and figure out, why does the landlord want them? And how do you translate that into the tenant paying less money? And that's very important. If it's a situation where they're a startup with no history, no real financing, venture financing, their financing is from relatives and different things like that, you really have to find space, in my opinion, a sublease from a corporation that's almost written this space off. And you go back to them and you offer them some money, usually short term. And you get this company seated in space and see how they perform.
A mid-sized tech company comes to you and says that they want to get a certain size building. What makes you sure that they're going to be able to have the length of the lease that you think that they want and the size?
Well, the size you figure out by the amount of space that they'll need for their employee. We translate it into dollars and what those dollars will buy in different parts of the city. So we show a tenant, for example, how much money it will cost for him to take 10,000 feet downtown, 10,000 feet in Midtown, 10,000 feet in Park Avenue South. Take 10,000 feet in Park Avenue South. It'll cost you a lot more money than even Midtown, or definitely downtown. So you figure out how much money you have, how much space will that buy you, is that enough space? And maybe you have to work backwards. Maybe, in fact, they can't have all the space they need because they just can't afford it.
And how do you know they're good for it? What do you do to vet them?
Usually the broker doesn't do that. The landlord does.
Okay.
And he asks for their financials. Now, of course, with startups, for a few years, they don't have any financials.
Right, so how do they get in?
Well, again, you look at the people who own the company. What good story can I put together about you to make the landlord say, this is a person I would trust in my building, I want in my building? You have to have a story that goes with the tenant.
Like Mark Zuckerberg's behind it.
That's right. And you have to educate the tenant. You have to give them market. We have market reports, and anytime anyone needs a market report for an area in Manhattan, we have that. We have some of our research group that just prepares those reports to give you an idea of what everything costs.
You usually lease mid and large size properties, but what about the startups and just starting? Do you have any advice for them?
Come in, we'll figure out how much space you really need. What's your success story? How can we direct you on what to do, where to go? How can we direct you on saving as much money as possible?
Great. Thank you so much for having you.
A pleasure. Thank you for coming here to see Cushman & Wakefield.
Thanks.
Now I see a place.